Do you believe a single old napkin could bring down an entire toxic system? Beneath the weathered wooden sign of the bistro restaurant, a man quietly stepped into the dimming evening light. His worn khaki jacket, scuffed sneakers, and plastic-rimmed glasses made him look like just another weary traveler seeking shelter. But none of the staff knew that this man, going by the name Noah Grant, was actually Gabriel Miles, the discreet CEO who had quietly acquired Maplewood Bistro 6 months ago. He wasn't there for a quarterly report or because of some fluctuating numbers on an Excel sheet, but because of an anonymous 13-second phone call that had echoed in his mind all day. If you don't show up tonight, there'll be nothing left to save. That single sentence haunted him and drove him to see firsthand what lay beneath the polished reports masking a rotting core. Inside the restaurant, candlelight shimmered against dark wood beams, casting a warm glow that barely masked the tension pulsing through every step, every avoided glance. The young hostess handed him a menu with a faint, uneasy smile, her hand trembling as if concealing something. And in the far corner, a sharply dressed man with slicked back hair and a perfectly knotted tie, matching the description Gabriel had for manager Derek Sloan, was harshly scolding a busboy over a minor smudge on a drinking glass. The staff moved like shadows. No one dared to chat beyond a whisper. No one dared to laugh out loud. Gabriel chose a secluded table tucked in a corner from where he could observe nearly the entire room. When the waitress, Riley Quinn, approached, there was a flicker of guardedness in her eyes, though her voice remained calm as she took his order for the salmon. Yet as she turned to leave, Gabriel caught a fleeting glance she threw toward the manager's office, where Derek had just vanished behind frosted glass. It was just a split-second gesture, but it told Gabriel everything the spreadsheets never could. Bistro wasn't losing money because of its menu or pricing. It was dying from something far deeper, something rotten at its core, something he was about to confront. The salmon had just been placed on the table, steam rising gently above the dark wooden surface. But Gabriel's gaze didn't stop at the perfectly crisped skin. It moved straight beneath the porcelain plate. In one subtle motion, Riley Quinn had managed to slide something underneath unnoticed, a neatly folded napkin wrapped in a thin layer of plastic, as if someone were trying to protect a sacred scrap of paper from flames. Gabriel didn't touch his fork. He waited until Riley had returned to the kitchen before gently lifting the plate. Under the warm yellow light, the napkin revealed a note scrawled in smudged black ink. "He's stealing our money. Please help." Beneath it was a hand-drawn QR code, small yet precise enough for Gabriel to understand that this wasn't just a cry for help. It was a signal from someone who knew he wasn't just another customer. A jolt ran down his spine. In all his years in the industry, Gabriel had received many anonymous tips, but no one had ever done this, risking their job, even their livelihood, to deliver such a simple, urgent message. He scanned the QR code with the old phone he was using as Noah Grant. A document opened. It was a handwritten log of work shifts, suspicious time cuts and dates when manager Sloan was seen slipping around the back of the restaurant with envelopes quietly tucked into his coat pocket. A few grainy camera stills had been included, possibly accessed by a staff member who had somehow bypassed the system. The evidence was rough and disorganized, but chilling in its truth. Gabriel closed the phone and tucked the napkin into his coat. He no longer looked toward the manager's office. Instead, he scanned the room. A room filled with young people working like they were afraid of being seen by one another. The girl named Riley had just done something even he, the one at the top, had never dared to do. She had sent the truth past the numbers and straight into the heart of power. And he knew that from this moment forward, he was no longer there to inspect a restaurant. He was there to carry the weight of a plea for help. Night had fully fallen when Gabriel left Bistro. He didn't drive back to his usual lakeside estate. Instead, he quietly made his way to a secluded parking lot nearly 10 blocks away. Inside the stillness of his car, he slumped into the back seat, the glow from the dashboard casting sharp angles across his tense face. His hand reached beneath the floor mat for a hidden laptop, opening a secure program SUI, an internal access portal to the restaurant's camera system. He had installed it the day he acquired Bistro, but had never once opened it until tonight. One by one, the feeds appeared. At first, the front entrance, then the kitchen, the cashier's counter, the staff lounge. He scrubbed backward through hours of footage, and within minutes, every suspicion hardened into a cold fury. In a grainy overhead view, Sloane, his crisp white shirt ironed to perfection, was seen slipping cash from the tip jar straight into his front pocket, under the helpless gaze of a young employee pressed against the sink. Gabriel kept watching. In another clip, Sloane was signing off time cards prematurely for 2 staff members, then coldly instructing them to continue serving customers off the clock. But it was a shorter, more brutal scene that made Gabriel's jaw tighten. Sloane was shown shoving a backup line cook against the cold storage door, snarling, "Talk back again, and you're out. I am the law here." Gabriel didn't blink. His face twitched with restrained rage. These weren't just legal violations. They were living memories, echoes of his own past. He remembered being 17, getting fired for handing a sandwich to a hungry co-worker. That single act of justice had set him on the long road to where he was now. But he had never imagined that one day he would witness that same injustice replayed within a business he built with his own hands. Gabriel saved every clip, time-stamped each incident, and created a detailed operations file. He was no longer acting as a CEO. In that moment, he was simply a man trying to mend a mistake he hadn't known he had made, allowing a monster to grow in the shadows under what he thought was the shelter of a warm and honest roof. By noon the next day, sunlight streamed diagonally through the restaurant's tall glass windows, illuminating every dust particle suspended in the air thick with tension. But today, that tension was about to shift. The glass door opened, and this time, the man who entered was no longer Noah Grant, the weary traveler in scuffed sneakers and a worn khaki jacket, but Gabriel Miles, dressed in a crisp black shirt and an indigo tie, flanked by 2 companions, a seasoned corporate ethics attorney and an internal investigations expert carrying a locked briefcase. They didn't need to speak. Their very presence disrupted the rhythm of the restaurant. Sloane, adjusting a set of silverware at the host station, looked up and froze. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. He almost placed the man as the salmon, ordering guest from the night before, but quickly dismissed the thought. No one would believe the flannel-clad diner from yesterday was the true owner of this entire place. Gabriel stepped to the central table and gently placed a tablet on the wooden surface. With a single tap, he connected to the restaurant's internal speaker system via a private Bluetooth signal known only to senior staff. One press. The screen lit up. Footage from the security cameras began to play, and Sloane's voice rang out, sharp and unmistakable. "I am the law here." The sound pierced the illusion he had built like a swan cutting through still air. One by one, the employees began to emerge from the kitchen, the dish pit and the floor, drawn toward the center. They stared at the screen, as if finally witnessing something everyone had long known, but no one had dared to say. Sloane took a half step back, his face turning pale. "What is this?" he stammered. Gabriel didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the attorney, who swiftly pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. Inside were documents for immediate termination, a formal letter of charges, and a transfer of operational authority. "Mr. Sloane," Gabriel said, his voice low, steady, and undeniable. "You are hereby relieved of all duties at Bistro, effective immediately." In the stunned silence that followed, only the heavy breathing and the quiet crash of truth settling in could be heard, like a winter storm breaking through the walls. As Gabriel's declaration echoed through the room, time seemed to freeze in a single, breathless pause. Sloane stood paralyzed, staring at the envelope in his hands as if it were a death sentence. No one moved. No one spoke. Until the next clip began playing on the screen. Sloane quietly pocketing tip money, his eyes darting nervously, lips pressed into a familiar, smug smirk. A soft, "Oh my God," escaped from the staff bench. A young waitress covered her mouth, hands trembling. Gabriel turned to them, his gaze no longer just that of an owner, but of a witness and a protector. "If anyone else has been mistreated," he said slowly, "speak now. I'm here to listen." Without hesitation, a young line cook stepped forward, still clutching a grease-stained towel. I had 3 hours cut from my shift last week. When I asked why, Mr. Sloane said I wasn't productive enough. Another voice followed. I was forced to work on Sunday, even though I'd requested it off 2 weeks in advance to care for my sick child. When I said no, I got reassigned to clean the bathrooms. One more spoke, then another, then more. Voices once stifled now surged like a rising tide, tearing down the wall of silence Sloane had built over months. His face turned ghostly pale. His eyes darted, desperate for escape. "Lies!" he shouted. "You're all teaming up to frame me. I did what I did for the good of this restaurant." But no one believed him anymore. And just then, the final clip played, blurry but unmistakable. Sloane shoving Riley hard into the freezer door, furious because she had dared to discount a meal for the elderly man who visited every week. The young woman trembled, clutching her shoulder, tears streaming down her face. The entire room went silent. Sloane lunged for the tablet, but Gabriel had already signaled. 2 plainclothes security officers emerged from the kitchen, moved in, and held him firmly in place. "Let go of me! I'll sue! I have a lawyer!" he screamed. But no one was listening anymore. Riley stood quietly against the wall, stunned, looking at Gabriel. He gave her a single nod, silent, but full of meaning. a promise that from this moment on, she would no longer have to bow her head in fear. Sloane was escorted out of the restaurant in absolute silence, and as the doors closed behind him, it was as if a soft breeze swept through the room, carrying with it the first whispers, not of doubt, but of hope. Bistro was entering the beginning of its rebirth. The atmosphere in the restaurant felt cleansed after the confrontation. The residue of truth still lingered in the eyes of the staff. But this time, it was not fear. It was awakening. Gabriel did not stand on a podium, did not hold a microphone, and did not wear a commanding suit. He simply stepped onto a stool near the bar, arms crossed, his gaze calm, like a father speaking to his own family. "I didn't come here just to fire a tyrant," he began, his voice low but warm. "I came to fix what I myself had carelessly neglected." A few people lowered their heads in silence. Glances met across the room. But Gabriel did not cast blame. He went straight to what everyone had been waiting for. "All of you. Those whose hours were cut, whose wages were reduced, who were forced to work beyond regulation, will be fully reimbursed with 3 months' interest from my personal account. Today." A ripple of astonishment swept through the room. A young woman burst into tears, clutching the towel in her apron pocket. Gabriel continued, his tone firmer. "Starting next week, each of you will receive access to a mental health support fund. Anonymous, no explanations required, no reporting needed. I know fear is the hardest thing to heal, and I will not let it take root again." Then he turned toward Riley, who still stood near the kitchen door, her eyes filled with tears, but no longer trembling. "And you, Riley Quinn." The room seemed to hold its breath. "As of tomorrow, you will be Bistro's assistant manager with a 70% raise, full benefits, and a seat at the table in shaping new personnel policies, if you accept." Riley could barely believe her ears. Her lips moved without sound, and then finally released a single word. "I accept." The entire restaurant erupted into a round of applause, unlike anything it had ever heard. These once silent, resigned individuals now looked at each other with newfound trust. Gabriel nodded toward an older waitress. "We'll need someone to fill Sloane's role. I'd like to appoint Mrs. Maria, who has been here since day one, as interim manager." Maria froze, tray still in hand, eyes wide with disbelief. And then, amid the hum of hopeful whispers, Gabriel closed the meeting with a promise. "Bistro will no longer be a place where people merely endure to survive. It will be a place where people live fully, to be who they truly are." In the final rays of daylight streaming through the windows, that small restaurant, once ruled by fear, had just been laid with the first brick of a new foundation, a culture of respect and courage. Just days after the restructuring, Bistro had taken on an entirely new presence, not in signage or paint color, but in the rhythm of life within, where the eyes of the staff no longer darted away, where footsteps no longer crept cautiously, and where smiles no longer felt forced. Gabriel still showed up every day, but not as a distant owner. He wore rolled-up shirt sleeves, occasionally carried trays, helped clear tables during peak hours, and listened alongside his staff to customer feedback. That simple presence began melting away the layers of doubt left behind from months under Sloane's grip. One morning, Gabriel sat at the prep table where Riley was teaching a new employee how to mark orders. In the soft light streaming through the window, he asked gently, "How did you know I wasn't just another tourist that night?" Riley laughed. A real laugh. No longer the kind she had to fake for tips. "I wasn't sure," she replied, but Sloane once slipped up and mentioned a silent owner who had asked for a payroll review. And when you walked in with that look, like you had lived this place once, I took a gamble. Gabriel stayed silent. That answer pulled him back to his own 20s, when he once bet on a good boss and lost. But this time, he had become the one others dared to bet on. In the days that followed, he kept listening to quiet stories. Javier, the kitchen assistant who sent every paycheck back to Mexico to care for his aging mother. Sarah, the waitress taking night classes to get into nursing school. Maria, now the acting manager, who was once promised a promotion by Sloane, only to have her name left off the year-end bonus sheet. Gabriel quietly fixed what had long gone unheard, replacing broken chairs, repainting the staff lounge, and buying the coffee machine that had been on the suggestion list for 2 years. Each small act felt like a silent nod to those whose voices had never been acknowledged. And then one late evening, after the restaurant had closed, Riley approached Gabriel with a small bag. "I think you should keep this," she said. Inside was the napkin from that night, now washed clean, sealed in plastic, and framed in a small wooden box. Gabriel stared at it, a feeling rising in his chest that words could not quite name. "I used to think I'd tear it up," she said softly, "but the way you looked at me made me believe maybe you'd be the last person I dared to trust." Gabriel didn't answer. He simply tightened his grip on the frame, as if holding onto a promise he would never allow himself to forget. Weeks after the pivotal purge, Maplewood Bistro was not just revived, it had become a symbol. Local media began reporting on a restaurant miraculously restored by a mysterious CEO, a man who not only rescued a financially depleted business, but also rekindled the trust that had once been buried beneath workplace abuse and oppression. But for Gabriel Miles, the headlines meant little. What concerned him more was how the people within these walls were finally stepping out of the shadows, beginning to live a life of work that no longer required fear, silence, or trading dignity for a paycheck. One Monday morning, Gabriel arrived earlier than usual. He sat in the corner of the bar, sipping an espresso made by Riley, a ritual that had quietly become their way of greeting each day. As customers began to trickle in, he watched in silence. There were no more shouting matches, no more hurried, nervous footsteps. Instead, soft laughter came from the kitchen. Glances between staff flowed naturally, and customers expressed gratitude without a hint of forced courtesy. The new waitress, once too shy to meet anyone's eyes, now greeted guests with a full smile. Maria, now the official manager, moved fluidly between the kitchen and dining room, resolving issues with the calm of someone who had once understood the deep unease that used to linger in this space. Later that afternoon, during a quiet break between shifts, Riley joined Gabriel at his table. She handed him a draft of the new menu, her first time contributing to official content as a mid-level manager. Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered. "I think Bistro should add a hope sandwich. 10% of each sale goes to the emergency support fund for staff." Gabriel smiled, Not the kind of smile that signals agreement, but the kind that shows trust returning to where it belongs. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to think business was about profit, reports, and market share. But now I believe the real value lies here, when someone who once feared being fired for telling the truth now dares to speak up to help others be braver." Riley stayed quiet. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something familiar, the wooden frame with the old napkin. But this time, below the handwritten line, "He's stealing our money. Please help." She had added a new sentence. And someone listened. Gabriel took the frame into his hands, brushing gently across the glass. Of all the billion-dollar deals he had signed, of all the skyscrapers he had helped build, nothing had ever moved him like this one piece of paper. "I'll place this in the corporate headquarters," he said, "so that everyone remembers sometimes the greatest change begins with just a small piece of paper and someone brave enough to write on it." Riley nodded, her eyes glistening. "And someone kind enough to listen." When Gabriel stepped out of Bistro that evening, there were no stars in the sky. But the warm light pouring from the restaurant's windows left him feeling weightless. His footsteps were no longer those of a billionaire inspecting a branch. They were the steps of a man who had just fulfilled a promise to Riley, to a team once suffocated by fear, and to himself. Bistro, in the end, was not just a restaurant that had been saved. It had become a community, rebuilt from 4 trembling handwritten words and a heart that refused to turn away from a cry spoken in silence. In today's world of modern business, conversations often revolve around data, strategy, and cost optimization. But what happened at Bistro serves as a powerful reminder. No system is truly stable if its foundation is built on silence, fear, and exploitation. From the perspective of an organizational management expert, this is not merely a touching story. It is a vivid lesson in the power of trust and transparency. Because what allows a business to endure isn't its net profit or brand ranking, but whether its employees dare to speak up when something is wrong. And more importantly, whether you are willing to stop and truly listen. Gabriel Miles was once a man standing at the peak, believing that financial reports were enough to grasp the state of his business. But in the end, a trembling napkin with no name, no address, and only 4 words, "Please help us," became the clearest wake-up call. It compelled him to step down, step inside, and then rise again. Not as an owner, but as a leader. If you've ever worked in an environment where your voice was ignored, if you've ever questioned whether your courage mattered within a harsh system, then this story is for you. Because sometimes all it takes is one small act, one person brave enough to write, and one person willing to read, to change the fate of an entire community. And if this story struck a chord within you, don't hesitate to hit like to help spread this message to more people. Subscribe to stay connected to the stories to come, where courage, justice, and humanity always have a place. And leave a comment with the phrase, "Speak up," if you believe that everyone deserves to be heard, no matter where they stand in society. Because in the end, a business or a community isn't measured by its size or its assets, but by how it treats the smallest among them. And as Bistro has shown us, when a workplace becomes a safe place, it's no longer just a restaurant, it becomes a home.